Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing an absolute deep dive into orchid care and propagation techniques. We're going to take your houseplant skills to the next level by mastering one of the most notoriously misunderstood plants out there. We're moving way beyond just basic watering and really getting into the botany, the perfect environmental balance, and those incredible propagation methods that professional growers use to cultivate and multiply these stunning plants. Look, we've all been there, right? You bring home this gorgeous, blooming orchid, only to watch it slowly drop its flowers and just kind of fade away on your windowsill. But seriously, don't write them off as being too difficult or fussy. Orchids are actually highly intuitive and incredibly resilient once you crack their biological code. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to cover the secret to orchid survival, mastering light, water, and soil, pruning for a second bloom, multiplying orchids using the Kiki method, and finally, reviving and saving sick orchids. Let's just jump right in. Starting off with Section 1, the secret to orchid survival. Okay, here's the absolute game changer. The fundamental truth you have to realize is that we aren't just keeping a standard potted houseplant here. We're actually mimicking a tropical tree canopy. Orchids, especially the Phalaenopsis variety that most of us buy, are epiphytes. In their natural rainforest habitat, they don't grow buried in dark, heavy dirt on the ground. No way. They physically cling to the high branches of tree canopies. Their roots are exposed to the open air, catching passing rainwater and just breathing. If you bury an epiphyte in dense potting soil, it literally suffocates. Because they live up in trees, orchids absolutely despise standard potting soil. To replicate that airy canopy environment, we need a special, highly breathable substrate. The perfect mix relies on chunky pine bark as the base, which lets water drain instantly while keeping just a thin film of moisture. Then we add perlite for extra aeration, charcoal pieces to keep things clean and fight off bacteria, and just a touch of sphagnum moss to hold a little bit of necessary humidity. This mix is loose, it's airy, and it is exactly what your plant is craving. And this epiphyte nature, it totally explains why transparent, perforated pots are mandatory. Since they grow high in the trees, orchid roots actually contain chlorophyll and perform photosynthesis, just like the leaves do. They literally need to see the sun. If you stuff an orchid into a dark, opaque ceramic pot, you're depriving the roots of vital light and trapping stagnant moisture. You always want to use a clear plastic pot with plenty of drainage holes so the roots can breathe freely and capture that ambient light. Moving on to Section 2, mastering light, water, and soil. Finding the sweet spot for their daily environment is all about balance. They crave indirect, dappled sunlight, exactly like a rainforest canopy. Direct, scorching sun, that'll burn them, but a dark corner will stop them from blooming entirely. They like mild room temperatures, ideally between 18 and 25 degrees Celsius, and they absolutely hate cold drafts or blasting heaters. And moisture-wise, they love a humid environment, but they absolutely cannot tolerate sitting in standing water at the bottom of a pot. So, throw away your rigid weekly watering schedule. Seriously, just toss it. Instead, you're going to follow the root color rule. This little trick is completely foolproof. If you look through that clear pot and see vibrant, deep green roots, your plant is happy and hydrated. Do not water it. But when those roots turn a pale, silvery gray color, that means the plant is thirsty. That is your ultimate cue to water. Ideally, use the dunking method where you soak the pot in room temperature water for about 10 to 15 minutes and then let it drain completely. All right, Section 3, pruning for a second bloom. Don't panic when the flowers finally drop. To coax a second bloom out of the exact same spike, just examine the stem. If it's still firm and green, count up from the base. See those little bumps along the stem? Those are called nodes. You want to count up to the second or third node from the bottom on that green stem and make a clean cut just slightly above it. This actually encourages the plant to send out a fresh side shoot right from that node, bringing you a whole new set of flowers. Now, when you're pruning, hygiene is everything. Always wait until the blooms have naturally fallen off and use sterilized shears. Wiping them with rubbing alcohol works perfectly. If the stem is turned completely yellow and woody, it's not going to bloom again. Just cut it at the base, leaving about 2 to 3 centimeters. But here is an incredible botanical hack for you. Dab common kitchen cinnamon right on the open cut. It acts as a brilliant natural fungicide, sealing the wound and stopping any bacterial rot right in its tracks. Which brings us to Section 4, multiplying orchids using the Kiki method. Okay, this is where things get really fun. Under certain conditions, your orchid will perform a literal magic trick. It will sprout an exact genetic clone of itself right on the stem. This is called a kiki, which is this wonderful Hawaiian word meaning baby or child. Sometimes an orchid produces a kiki when it's stressed and trying to ensure its survival, and other times it happens just because the conditions are absolutely perfect. You'll literally notice tiny leaves and little roots sprouting suspended in midair, right off the side of the main flower spike. Now, safely detaching this baby without harming the mother plant requires a little bit of patience. You've got to wait for the kiki's roots to reach at least 3 to 5 centimeters long. Once it's strong enough, take a sterile blade and cut the mother stem about 2 to 3 centimeters below the baby. Dust that handy cinnamon on the cut on the mother plant and the cut on the baby to seal them up. Finally, plant the kiki gently in its own small, clear pot with fresh bark and wait a full 24 hours before giving it its first light watering, just to let those cuts heal. Now, you might see people online trying the stem-cutting greenhouse method, but when comparing it to the natural keiki method, the choice is pretty clear for us homegrowers. While the keiki happens naturally right on the mother plant and is super beginner-friendly, advanced growers sometimes take empty cut stems, seal the ends with wax, and lay them in a closed container with moss to force a baby to grow. Honestly, that stem cutting method takes intense monitoring and is super prone to mold, making the natural keiki method the absolute best choice for propagating at home. Finally, Section 5. Reviving and saving sick orchids. Look, even the best indoor gardeners run into trouble sometimes. If you notice the leaves are suddenly sticky to the touch, developing gray patches, or losing their firm structure and turning completely soft and droopy, do not throw the plant away. These are just distress signals. And because we now know how the plant functions, we can easily diagnose and fix the root of the problem. If the leaves are sticky, that's usually the calling card of our first culprit, the mealybug. These little pests look like tiny, white, cotton-like masses clustered on the leaves and stems. They suck the sap from the plant and secrete this sticky honeydew that can actually cause gray mold. But the fix is remarkably simple. You don't need harsh chemicals. You can just gently wipe them away using a soft cloth with a mix of warm water and mild dish soap, or by applying a bit of natural neem oil. On the flip side, what if you have soft, leathery, droopy leaves? Well, you are almost certainly overwatering. I know, it sounds totally contradictory, but soft leaves usually mean the roots have been sitting in water, drowned, and rotted away. Without healthy roots, the plant can't take up water, so it's literally dehydrating itself to death while sitting in a puddle. You need to immediately take it out of the pot, trim away any black, mushy, or hollow roots with sterile shears, dust the remaining healthy roots with cinnamon, and repot it into entirely fresh, dry, chunky bark. Ultimately, it all comes back to this one beautiful concept. When you care for an orchid, you aren't just keeping a houseplant. You are cultivating a tiny piece of the tropical tree canopy right in your living room. If you follow these structured rules, from the silvery root check before watering, all the way to those cinnamon cuts, your orchid is going to reward you with spectacular blooms and thrive for years to come. So the next time you look at your orchid, remember, you're sustaining a resilient piece of a rainforest canopy. The question is, what are you going to do next? Will you try to coax a second bloom from your current plant? Or are you ready to step up and clone an entirely new generation with a kiki? Let us know your choice. Share this explainer with a fellow plant lover. And as always, happy growing.